words. And let me introduce my friend, Frank Hamill.
I cut you off, you've been cut off. Mr. Perry was talking about his, is it getting you, Jerry? Right. Mr. Perry was talking about the talk that he wanted to give this year, and he wanted to kind of spread it out a little bit. And he's put it between myself and another fellow sitting here close to me and him. I was supposed to do a review of 1995, 1996, what we did, but basically we got into a review last night when we had our, this thing is echoing in it. It's too much? I'll just back away from it a little bit. I'm not a trained teacher. Anything that I do from experience. Anything that I do is kind of like I dug it out of the ground with the help of Mr. Perry, with the help of Mr. Perry's material. I've tried to do what he said, fish all over the country. My wife and I took a map of the United States and we put a pin in Chickamauga, in Chattanooga, and I drew a 1 hour circle, a 2 hour circle, a 3 hour circle, up to 12 hours around Chattanooga. And I figured I could drive anywhere on Friday night and drive 12 hours, arrive there at 6 o'clock in the morning, fish all day long, come in that evening, eat a big steak, pass out, get up the next morning, fish half a day, and go back to Chattanooga 12 hours. And I'm on my, right now, fourth month home. This one's got 100,000 miles on it. That's going on the weekends. The main purpose behind it, as Mr. Perry said, fish as many reservoirs, fish as many lakes as you can. And as you continue to do that, you'll grow. So I'm talking to you, and when I give you this interpretation of what I'm going to read, which is our guidelines, then it's going to be what I have learned through experience. It's going to be what I have learned from Mr. Perry. It's going to be what I have learned from Mr. Perry's material. And what I'm going to do is tell you a story or two as it relates to the guidelines, which made the guidelines be complete to me as a spoonplugger. Spoonplugger's basic guideline. By the way, anybody that comes in Chattanooga Spoonpluggers nowadays, we have a special class beforehand, and I do 3 or 4 months of our meetings, one meeting a month, and I do on nothing but the basic Spoonplugger's guideline, because I figure if they can understand that, then they'll understand everything else. Spoonplugger's basic guideline. The home of the fish, where he spends the greater part of his time, is a sanctuary from a changing or hostile environment. It's somewhere between the deepest water in the area being fished. I can tell you story after story after story of the problems that I personally had with not understanding what a sanctuary was, not understanding where a sanctuary might be, not understanding what the deep water is, not understanding what the deepest water is, not understanding how this might affect the fish while he's down there. But one of the best stories that I can tell you is what bothered me most was one of the only times that I ever got up in Mr. Perry's face. I have studied, and I'm very intent. I fish very hard. I'm traveling many hours to Florida. I'm traveling many hours to Georgia. And we're on Kissimmee Lake, and there's a lot of people that's down there. And a lot of 7s, a lot of 8s, a lot of 9s are being caught, and 2 or 3 10s. Matter of fact, Scott Jenkins, who works at Buck's Baits, had got his first 7, his first 8, his first 9, and his first 10 on this trip in 2 days' time. So we know that big fish are moving. And my idea, my goals, not the goals of a spoonplugger, but Frank Hamill's goals has always been, I enjoy catching big fish. Now, I don't particularly care anything about a 1 or 2 pound fish, except the 1 or 2 pound fish tells me where the big fish are. That is my indicator. Once I find small fish, I got a good indication of where the big fish are. They are not compatible, but you can always bet that the little fish got an eye on the big fish. We go out fishing, everybody's catching fish. When we come back in, I'm disappointed because I'm looking for my 15, 16, and 17. I've been having a reoccurring nightmare dream of me catching 2 16-pounders and 1 17-pounders in a day's time casting. This has been going on for a long, long time. I had dreamed it so many times that I just knew that it was going to happen. Because the dream was always the same thing, and I could see the same background. And to me, it was going to happen in December. And the time was right. Everybody was catching the big fish up on what we call the break line, which is up in about 8.5 to 10 feet of water, going around an island called Bird Island. And we're working this change of material that is there at Bird Island. I tell Mr. Perry when we come in, I said, they're not catching any real big fish. What will it take to get up that 13, 14, 15, 16? He said, well, you know they're there. And I said, yes, sir, they are. And he said, they got to be out there in the slot. And I said, yes, sir, I know they are. But that's what I figured too. There's only one slot in the lake, and the slot is just out from Bird Island. You have this big, long, sweeping bar that is about a mile to a mile and a half across. It goes out to a crest. There the material change of the bottom changes from a sandy bottom into a gooey bottom, which we call a break line. This is a break line that the fish know that it's there, and if we are smart enough, we can know that it's there. We figure that the fish are coming from this after they hit into the gooey bottom. They've got about half a block, and they drop off into 14, 15, 16 foot of water. That's where I'm going to get my big fish. So I tell Mr. Perry, tomorrow I'm going out to the slot and I'm going to stay there till hell freezes over. He understands that. That's the way he fishes. You go out into an area, you stay in the area until the fish tell you that they're either there or not there. I go out and about, I don't know, 3-4 hours, the fish start moving, they start catching 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s, and I stay out there because I get intent because I know mine's coming. But mine doesn't come. When I come back in this afternoon, right in front of everybody, I said, Mr. Perry, I went out to the slot, and I stayed there, and I didn't catch the fish, and the guideline said that so-and-so, and he ignored me. I mean, he just kind of turned his head to the side on me. I was not to be ignored. That bothered me. I have an ego. I'm needing to be busted real bad, but I don't realize it at this point in time, but I'm going to go out and like a little dart. Here I come back at him again. And I said something about the fact, I stayed out there and I fished hard. And he said, yeah, I started to go out there too and stay with you for a while. And then when I saw him catching fish in here, I went on back in, which is an indication to me, you're stupid. You stayed out there and I went in there to have some fun. So I couldn't stand it. I waited later on. I told Jerry, she came over to the camper. And she said something about something. I said, well, let me tell you, Jerry. I said, what happened out there today has totally destroyed me. Because my understanding of the basic guideline is when the fish move up, the bigger fish are going to be out here, the smaller fish are going to move up. And as far as I'm concerned, an 8, 9, and 10-pound bass down there is a smaller fish. They moved up to medium depths. My bigger fish should have been out here. And I said, this has destroyed me. This has destroyed the guidelines. So she said, well, go up there and talk to him about it. He was out, and I caught him. Down in Florida, it's not a wood shack, but it should have been a wood shack. It's what they call where they keep the coolers, where they keep the fish. And I came up on Mr. Perry, and I started in again, and I got up in his face. And this time he took about 2 steps, and then he turned back, and he said, Frank, he said, I believe in my book, I wrote, that sometimes when the conditions are so good, that the fish will move up, and all the fish will move. Now the smaller fish will move more towards the shallows. But then when the movement is over with, they'll move back out. But if the conditions are stable enough, they might not go all the way back. They may settle down halfway in between. He said, did it ever occur to you that you might have been fishing where they weren't out past them? No. I didn't catch the fish, everybody else did. That was my lesson on understanding about fish when it came to the deepest in the water or the area being fished. We don't know where sanctuary is. The fish know where sanctuary is. The fish go to sanctuary because this is a place where conditions are stable. Those conditions may be stable at 12 feet. Those conditions may be stable at 45 feet deep. But wherever it is, they got tails and they're going to swing. So if you go spend your life chasing fish in a sanctuary situation, you're going to be disappointed quite a bit. You're going to be disappointed. The home of the fish, the place where he spends the greater part of his time, is a sanctuary from a changing or hostile environment. Now, when it says the home, to you and I, or to me, that means a place where the fish goes all the time. I think to a fish it's kind of like a trout. He may be happy right here for 2 or 3 days and that's his home, and then he moves to an area that may be a little bit shallower, a little bit deeper. And when he's there, that's his home. This term home might throw you. The fish is happy where he is. He has a tail, he'll swing. That's the way I understand the home of the fish. This is where he'll spend the greater part of his time. It is a sanctuary from a changing or a hostile environment. Does anybody not understand changing or hostile environment? Does anybody not understand it when you're in water that is 30 feet or less, that it is constantly changing, it is constantly under change? Not only is the zooplankton, the plankton, all the materials which all the menace feed off of, all of the reason why the lake exists to begin with, all the goodness of the lake is in that top layer. The light penetrating this can change, rains can come, water can change color. All of it takes place in this upper layer, all of it. And it's a constantly changing environment. And if a fish does not have to adjust to this, if he can go to an area where conditions are more stable, then that's where he's going to be, where conditions are stable. It is somewhere in the deepest water of the area being fished. If the water is 60 feet deep, he may be on the bottom for 2 or 3 days if a bad front comes through. I personally have come out and fished on days that I know fronts were coming through and stay with the fish. Now, earlier John Bowie said something to me, and by the way, John Bowie, the gentleman that is here, he's been there for many, many years. He was there when conditions were tough. He was there when they did not have sonars. He was there when they didn't have 700s and 800s. Mr. Bowie was talking about an article that I wrote, and he said something very nice to me, which I, again, thank you very much, Mr. Bowie, for the nice words. But he said, you didn't tell the people about staying out there for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours. He understands that. Most fishermen don't understand that when you go fishing, you stay and you stay and you stay. The gentleman just got walked up across the room, Mr. Kinnear. There's a gentleman who knows how to fish and stay with it. When he first came here a number of years ago, Mr. Kinnear didn't go out and go fishing and stay out there and stay out there. Now Mr. Kinnear catches more fish than I've seen in a long, long time. But every time you go down to see Mr. Kinnear, he's not there because he's out fishing. He understands staying on structure for 7, 8, 9, and 10 hours till the fish either tell you that they're either there or not there. The fish will tell you whether they're there or not there. When in sanctuary depths, the fish are normally so dormant and so deep that they are almost impossible to locate or to catch. If anybody ever wonders about the word locate, most of the time people use the word locate by seeing them on their sonar. I've located a structure situation, which means I came across it with my sonar. Most people don't say I have located a structure situation because I took an 800 on wire and I was down at 32 feet and I felt the material go from soft and gooey to hard. Or I felt the lure come over a rock that is on the edge of a channel that's fallen off down at the base break line, which is 34 feet deep. They said I saw that, I located that. If you'll go back and look at your old Fishing Facts magazines from years ago, you'll find that George Pazik, who was an electrical engineer, wrote an article, and if you don't understand it now, you need to get where somebody can explain it to you on sonars. Sonars average what they read. If you're in 20 foot of water, you anchor your boat on the front and on the back. You take a weight and go right down by your sonar transducer. And I want you to measure on your sonar when that weight goes down and you no longer see it on the bottom. And then measure the distance, put a knot right there, and measure the distance on how much you can lift that rock or that weight up and down without seeing it on your sonar and have it bounce on the bottom. You'll find that on 20 foot of water with a normal 20 degree transducer or 18 degree transducer, you'll find that that area is about 2 feet. Bass occupy most of the time the area which is close to the bottom, which means if you're coming over looking for fish, looking for a structure situation that might contain fish on it, you can't see the bass that are there because they're within that 2 foot gap. And you'll see the shad and you'll see the suspended fish. that have a tendency more to spin to see white bass and see crappie. Don't get caught up in the word locate, and understand that locate doesn't take place by the sonar. Locate means for you to take your lure and locate structured situations. That's the only way you're ever going to learn. The word catch. Everybody understands the word catch. The fish has to cooperate unless you're snagging. Just that simple. A fisherman, as fishermen, we are saved due to the fact that fish do not stay so dormant, so deep all the time. Once or twice a day, on an average day, they will become active and they may move towards the shallows. Now, what he's saying right here is very simple. We're saved as fishermen, we're going to catch fish. And he is telling you that on an average day, and everybody here does not know what an average day is. Very few people know what an average day is. If you went around this campground and asked a different people what's an average day, you'd get 1,500 different questions and answers on that. You're going to have to look a little bit further. I'm not going to go into what an average day is for fishing. But we know that most days are not average. We know that most days are mostly weather-wise bad. So an average day is an average fishing day when the fish have been moving and the fish are already active. Now you're into an average day when fish are moving, that they will become active. Now, Mr. Perry makes a statement out here. A lot of times he doesn't make an absolute statement. This time he does. It says, they will become active. Now, that's not saying that they may be. He says they will. He knows they do become active twice a day. On an average day, a good fishing day, they will become active. And they may move towards the shallows. And may is underlined, which means they what? May not. Now, in your fishing, Mr. Perry has told us many times he doubts if anybody has ever caught a fish from a sanctuary position. Because Mr. Perry, as I understand it, says sanctuary position means the fish is so dormant, so inactive at that moment, he is impossible to be caught. But the very instant that fish wakes up and becomes active, he is not in sanctuary anymore. He's woke up, he's become active, and he is possibly catchable at that moment. So if you follow the guidelines from the shallows to the deep, and the shallows to the deep, Mr. Perry knows that somewhere, as long as you keep working like you want to, you're going to coincide with the fish when they become active, because they will become active twice a day on an average day. Am I saying this wrong?
Once or twice.
What?
Once or twice.
Okay, once or twice. I don't think anybody has to tell anybody that the old saying is always, if you don't catch fish between certain hours, never leave the lake between 10 and 2, the most active, the best thing. I can tell you stories about that. We know that the fish move in the middle of the day, and some of the best activity periods do occur in the middle of the day. They may become, they will become active and may move towards the shallow water. We are saved again because when the fish become active and move towards the shallow water, they do not go in any direction. If there's anything that you ever found out about Mr. Perry or heard before you ever became structural fisherman, you probably heard the fact that fish move on paths. Now, the fish are not lost. We are lost as fishermen. Very simply, we have to find the paths. Anybody that went out with the Chattanooga Spoonpluggers on the water should have got a good explanation of paths. Should have seen paths. Saw on their sonar paths. Saw the paths from the shallows to the deep and these are the super highways. When you get up in the morning, you do whatever you have to do. You shave, you shower, you get down on your path and you go to work. I think that when the fish move, and what Mr. Perry means is when the fish move and they're going towards the shallows, they're going on their job, they're going on to work, they're going to get food. It's very simple. When they don't, when they become active and just mill around in place, they're more semi-dormant, they're not as active, they're not as seriously searching. So it is possible to catch that fish. It is possible if you present it to them. The route that they take has bottom feature structure, brakes, brake lines that show them the way. As fish move along the bottom feature structure, they will pause or stop at things, brakes, brake lines on the bottom. How far they go along a migration route towards the shallows, and how long they stay at a brake or brake line before turning back to the deep water is dependent on control by the weather and the water conditions at that particular time. I'm not going to read the next part because the next part gets into being specifics on how, why, where, how to use the tools and the training that Mr. Perry offers and the knowledge that Mr. Perry teaches. You want to know a story? Fishing situation. Fish that are moving, fish that are going, fish that are traveling on the path. Give you a structure that most of you should be familiar with, what we call our number 3 structure across from Pinky's Pond. Anybody not know where this is? Very simply, it's a channel break line, 18 to 20 feet deep. Creek channel. Creek channel goes right across the small flats. Flat goes to a delta. Delta is a very distinct delta, rises up about 6 feet higher than the flat on either side. This creek channel goes right through that delta. Very simply, we know the path. You work constantly, week after week, year after year, you catch fish out of the creek channel. Occasionally, if you learn to fish deeper, you start catching the fish 100 yards downstream. If you're familiar with the creek channel and know how the fish are moving, then you start catching fish 100 yards downstream, and that's what happened to me one day, and I was refreshing. We're all the time trying to become better casters. We are better trollers than we are casters. We have never been efficient in our casting positions because in a reservoir, when the activity period starts and the fish move along their structure, their breaks in the break line, and they find their places where they pause, and those are the places that we generally do a good job of mopping up. But on this particular day, we were working down around 28, 29 feet deep. Pop, we got into them. We knew it was it. She hit, I hit. I turned right around and I said, now we're going to wear them out. And we took our jump lures because it was so deep, and we threw out there and we caught a couple of fish. And it was feeling pretty good, and all of a sudden it was over. And I told Teresa, I said, something's wrong. You know, whatever wrong. We went back to the troll. This time when we went back to the troll, we didn't catch any fish. I said, they may have come up because it felt like I was catching right on the edge of the break line, 18, 19 feet deep. So this time, now we're 100 yards down from the creek channel. This time, when we hit them on the troll, we put the 700 on, took the wire off, we put the 700 on, boom, we get fish about halfway between the creek channel and us. I anchored the boat again, we had current in, we threw jump lures out there again, and we caught more fish. And then it was over again. Just went off, dead go. Pulled the anchor up again, went back to the troll. This time I found them at the creek channel. When I found them at the creek channel, then we anchored up, caught a couple of fish there. They went right on up the creek over to the delta. At the delta, they stalled. As they stalled over there, we caught them there by anchoring. Then I knew what the system was. All I did was make 2 or 3 casts and move the anchor and we went right down through there. And they just quicker make 3 or 4 casts and catch a fish too. I knew they were going to be traveling on down that line. We were going down the line with them and round them down that way. Now, that happens if you stand on your toes and you're understanding very simply that the route that they take has bottom features. They don't go in any direction.
Yeah.
Pardon me, I meant the route that they take has bottom features, structures, break lines that show them the way. As the fish move along, the bottom features, the structure, the channel break line in this case, they will pause or stop at things, breaks or break lines on the bottom. They pause and stop at the first creek channel where at the entrance. As far as they go along the migration route towards the shallows and how long they stay at a break or break line before turning back to deep water is dependent upon control by the weather and water conditions at that particular time. That's fishing. That is what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to elevate yourself to where you understand what this man is trying to say. You can turn right around and utilize his tools in an effective manner, and you use the intelligence that you have gained in experience to make it all happen. If you had made a wrong turn or goofed like I did, the fish would still forgive you, they were there. Spoonplugger's basic guideline. The home of the fish is deep water, where he spends the greater part of his time in a sanctuary from a changing or hostile environment. It is somewhere between the deepest water in the area being fished. When he is in the deep or the deepest water in the area, when he is, you seem to jumping on the line, my bicycle is driving crazy. When he is in sanctuary depths, the fish are so normally so dormant and are so deep that they are almost impossible to catch. As fishermen, we are saved due to the fact that the fish do not stay so dormant, they do not stay so deep all the time. Once or twice on an average fishing day, they will become active and may move towards the shallows. We are saved again because the fish become active and move towards the shallow waters. They do not go in just any direction. The route they take has bottom features, structures, break lines that show them the way. As the fish move along the bottom feature, the structure, they will pause or stop at things which are breaks and break lines on the bottom. How far they go, and this is how far they go along the migration route towards the shallows, and how long they stay at this break or break line before turning back to the deep water is dependent on, controlled by the weather and the water conditions at that particular time. That's spoon plugging.